Hello and welcome to the show from London at our new time, 16:30 GMT. Now, what is the risk of non-governmental organizations doing more harm than good when they go into conflict and disaster areas? Many of the world's trouble spots are heavily dependent on the work of NGOs, and critics say there's often a disconnect between their intentions and their actions. Haiti is the latest focus of that concern. Even before this year's devastating earthquake, it was nicknamed the Republic of NGOs because of its long relationship with foreign aid groups. Despite all those decades of working with aid groups and money, most Haitians still lived on less than $2 a day. After January's natural disaster, the dependence grew, with food, shelter and medical care coming from overseas. In war-torn areas around the world, NGOs fill a gap that governments cannot or will not fill themselves. They've sounded the alarm bells when situations become dire and work in harsh environments. But critics say they create increased dependency and often allow governments to get away with misguided policies instead of enacting serious reform. So today we ask, at what point does humanitarian aid become counterproductive? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can send an SMS or an email, and we'll also take your phone calls onto the show as well. To discuss this issue, we have Linda Polman, a Dutch journalist who has spent years covering UN troops on peacekeeping missions and reporting from the front lines of refugee camps in Haiti, Somalia and Rwanda. Her latest book is War Games, the story of aid and war in modern times, which focuses on her first-hand experience of the realities of aid agencies in war-torn countries. She'll be joining us from Amsterdam in a moment, but before we begin with her, we go first to New York, where a donor conference is being held, trying initially to collect $3.8 billion to start rebuilding Haiti. And we're joined by Ali Hayes, humanitarian aid expert for Oxfam, one of the biggest NGOs in the world working on poverty issues. Now, Ali, you just returned after spending 9 weeks in Haiti, and I wonder if you can give us some idea of whether things are improving. What are the conditions like in the country now?
Yes, thank you. I returned just a few days ago. The scale of the need there is still enormous. We're talking about 1.2 million people, 15% of the population directly affected. As I left, the rains had started to come, the rains that we had been fearing the arrival of since week one, since day one. It's still an uncomfortable situation for many people there. The aid agencies have done a surge for the shelter needs, and we've met 75% of the shelter needs. Oxfam is providing 300,000 people with fresh drinking water today, which I'm very proud of. But there's no room for complacency. There still needs to be more of a scale-up from the NGOs and from the UN, particularly from the government, to show the leadership that's needed to help the people at this difficult time.
Well, Ali, I wonder, with the words Haiti and aid being almost synonymous for half a century, I wonder, with this international donors conference taking place now, trying to raise billions of dollars, what real difference is going to be made?
Well, what we're hoping is that the earthquake has catalyzed international attention, media attention, and empathy with the plight of Haitians, everyday poor Haitians, some of them. We're hoping that this means that we can actually help the government to lift its words from its paper, its wishes, its recovery plan into action. So the solutions for Haiti have been known for some time, whether it's decentralization, whether it's tackling challenges of corruption at different levels. The difference now could be that we actually support them long enough to turn that into a reality. It would also be useful if donors focused on particular areas. It sounds strange coming from an NGO, but we sympathize with the Republic of NGO statement. There are too many NGOs in Haiti doing too many wrong things. There needs to be focus and accountability, and for us to work in step with the government's plan, not be acting unilaterally. And Oxfam works very closely with national partners and with national government to ensure that we're aligned with their priorities.
Now, you talked about being aligned with priorities of the government, and of course, when there's a disaster situation, you have to parachute in extra help. But I wonder, when you look at the kind of relationship that's been built with these NGOs in a place like Haiti for so long, what effort is made to try to not be isolated and sort of essentially live in compounds, but try to get out there, understand the situation, grasp the mindset of the people, and you know, be an integral part of the culture as well?
It's so, so important, and we encourage all of the NGOs working in Haiti to do exactly that. We have been there for 32 years. We have fantastic partnerships with local organizations. On the day of the earthquake, 99% of our staff were Haitian. Our country director was Haitian. So it was nationally led, nationally prioritized. We're working in the camps, we're working in the rural areas with the most vulnerable, with the poorest people every day. And they're the experts that guide us. So yes, we have parachuted some experts in for a very short time into Haiti, but we're passing over capacity building and training so that we're not leaving a vacuum when we go.
All right, Ali Hayes, thank you very much for joining us today. Good luck with your work in Haiti.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's get across to Amsterdam now. We've got Linda Pullman with us. And Linda, I'm glad you could join us. And I wonder, just looking at the current International Donors Conference taking place, and you've been following this, we'll get obviously onto some of these issues, but just tell me what you expect to come out of this International Donors Conference and whether or not it's going to make any real difference based on what you've seen in the past.
Well, they are asking for about $14 billion to be spent over the next 10 years in Haiti. It sounds like a lot of money, and I know that they will have problems to gather actually this money because the donors seem to be quite unwilling to put more money into Haiti after many years of failed aid there. And that's quite disappointing because $14 billion, it sounds like a lot, but it isn't actually. I mean, if you put it in another context, this $14 billion, American people in 1 year spent $14 billion on cosmetic surgery, you know, like liposuction and like vaginal corrections. So $14 billion is not that much, and I'm afraid they're not going to get it.
Linda, I wonder, you know, when you look at the amount that people are trying to raise here now, of course, one of the issues we face is where is that money going to go if it can be targeted? Let me see if I can get that in the form of an email question to you. We had a lot of viewers writing in with the questions, and I've got one that I'm going to just put to you that came in from a viewer by the name of Khatera Kakar, who wrote into our Facebook page saying, it's important to ensure that the money is going to the civilians in need and not the corrupt governments. Now, of course, you've witnessed a lot of money going astray in some of the research you've done. What can be done in the case of Haiti, do you think?
Well, it's not only a corrupt government. You can also speak of corruption amongst the NGOs. The NGOs and the international donors have kept the government in a very weak position by bypassing the government for the past decades and not doing anything about building the government and strengthening the government. So it's the NGOs that are actually spending the money, and it is the NGOs that should be checking whether the money is being spent correctly, and they're not doing that. So they do only half a job.
Linda, let me ask you about, when you see the competition for money now that's going to occur, the competition for the money that they're trying to raise for Haiti, of course, what this is going to do is create a whole new wave of people wanting to go into Haiti. The intention may be good, but when it comes to it, what risk is there that the NGOs are running the country in effect, and that really there's a dependency on them and there's no real government from the government itself?
Well, in Haiti, the NGOs have been running the country for the past decade, so that for Haiti it wouldn't be a lot of new news there. But it is true, NGOs, not only in Haiti, but in all disaster areas, humanitarian disaster areas, they are following the money, they are following the streams of money that donors make available. And what happens there then is that NGOs have to compete with each other for their share of the money, which means that they will put their own, call it business interest first, and not the interest of the victims on the spot first. And that can lead to very nasty questions, like, for example, do NGOs always do what is best for the people there? Do NGOs leave when their job is done, or do they stay as long as there's money available? So you get all these ethical questions that NGOs are not really directing.
Let me get another email question to you, if I may here, Linda. This came in actually from a viewer by the name of Imad Khan. And Imad wrote in saying, aid does more harm when imperialistic codes are dictated through the West on developing nations through agencies like the IMF.
Yeah, it's true. It's a very true statement, but that's the way we have organized the aid world. It is the donors deciding what, how and where and how fast money must be spent. And then the donors will make their own NGOs spend the money. And we all know that it should be the other way around. Like in Haiti now, you should ask what they call the grassroots organizations to decide how and how fast and on what the money should be spent. But it's always been turned around in a different way, from up down, and it should be down up. So yes, this is really true. People are being dictated in how to develop and how fast to develop.
One more question, actually. It seems like it's related to this possible, the issue you're discussing here. This is a viewer by the name of Hayatuddin Mohammed who wrote in saying, there is more harm done when there are too many strings attached to aid which tend to benefit the donor more than the recipient.
Well, this is true. A good example is food aid, for example, which is largely in the hands of donor country America. Food aid is brought to countries in large quantities, and it's very, very easy to misuse by local regimes. It is very easy to steal food aid and to distribute it amongst if you're a country at war, for example, to distribute it amongst your own soldiers. Rebel groups will chase food aid because their rebels have to eat as well. So what you see is that it is quite easy to manipulate aid and to steal aid and to make it disappear into the war chests.
Linda, don't go away. We're going to take a very short break here, but we'll continue our discussion with you when we return. Welcome back. We're discussing the impact of humanitarian aid around the world and where help can often turn to hindrance. I'm joined by Linda Polman, a veteran journalist who's critical of aid agencies for not doing enough and for prolonging disaster situations in some cases. As we get back to questions, we've got a caller on the line from UK who's also standing by. Mohammed, do you have a question?
Yeah, hello, hi. Actually, my name is Mohammed, basically. Thanks to you guys for, letting me talk to you. Basically, my main concern is it's good to help when a disaster strikes a country or disaster strikes a nation. But my main concern is I'm from Somalia and I've been living in the UK for the last 10 years. If you guys, if the donors donate the money, who are they going to give it to?
All right, Linda, that's one of the issues. We've obviously talked about the need for more transparency. Where is the failure in the lack of mechanisms for stopping corruption?
Well, the problem with aid is that if you go in as the aid community or as an aid organization, you are always dependent on local authorities. You either need permission from the local government to enter a country because you're a guest in a country, or you need permission from local warlords, for example, or local rebel leaders. And this is where the negotiations have to start with local authority. I myself, as a journalist, I wanted, for example, to enter rebel territory in Liberia. I would have to buy my way in, and because I was a poor freelance journalist, I would get away with throwing out bread out of the window of my car, and that was my entrance fee into that rebel territory. But if you are a large aid organizations, the price will go up. You will have to negotiate with local authorities, and it is up to those local authorities how high the price is. And sometimes the price is that you have to pay, like in Darfur, for example. The aid community in Darfur is paying millions of dollars in taxes and in special permits for permission to work with refugees. In other countries like Somalia, they have to deal with local warlords. They have to ask local warlords for permission and cooperation. And there are figures that say that in Somalia, about 80% of the value of the aid is actually disappearing into the pockets of warlords.
Mm-hmm. What's the solution then? I mean, it's very hard to say that the international community should just let these areas get on with it because they're potentially just feeding the corruption, that they're not really doing as much good. If only 1/5 of the money and the resources are going into doing any good, and the rest is fueling the corruption and the disaster continuing, what's the point of even going in then? But isn't it a bit harsh to say that?
Well, you don't need to say that. It's not black or white. It is not we either go or we let those people die. There's a lot of things that you can do. There's a lot of improvements that you can make. And I can assure you that the international aid community does not need me to tell them. They've analyzed the problem for a long time. They know how they can do better. And it always comes back to better cooperation between the organizations. It is much easier, like in Darfur, for example. Now there are over 100 international aid organizations being milked by the local government, who is at war, being milked by the rebel fractions that are at war with the government. It would be a lot of help if those aid organizations would combine their efforts, and they would combine their aid budgets and tell those rebel leaders and tell the local regime, this is it. We are not going to do this anymore. We will not be manipulated by you anymore. But because the aid community is so divided, they all work with their own donors and they all work with their own programs and their own budgets. They are in competition with each other, and this is why it is so easy to manipulate them. So combine efforts, coordinate your efforts, work together against the evil in those areas.
Well, another email here, if I could put this to you, from Zimbabwe. And this came from Barnabas Mvuti, a regular viewer who writes in, and he's saying, aid kills the creative potential of any society and creates dependency. Instead of aid, Western nations should sponsor local initiatives. How easy is that to do, based on what you've seen?
Yes, I'm very uplifted by the fact that your viewers and your callers actually know a lot of things that are actually wrong with aid, and they pay attention to it. That gives me courage. Again, the aid organizations, the aid community, and the donors, they know their weak spots. They know a lot of improvements that can be done. So if they would only implement what they have already thought about, then life for the victims in war zones and life for the victims in Haiti would be a lot better already.
I wonder, Linda, what your view on the way things are going nowadays in places such as Afghanistan, where a lot of NGOs are technically actually not non-government, that there is a militarization of aid, that the money is going to feed military resources doing civilian projects or civic projects. How do you regard that shift in where the money's going?
Yeah, well, it's part of the deal, and in a way, it has always been part of that deal. That deal, even in the Cold War, in the 80s and in the early 90s, it was always part of the deal of rich donor countries to tell the NGOs, look, if you want our money, if you want our government money to do your projects, you will have to serve our foreign policy. So there's not a lot of news about that. And in Afghanistan, history is repeated. If you want donor money as an aid organization, you will have to follow foreign policy of the government that you want the money from. So American NGOs are serving the American military and diplomatic agenda, and the same goes for many Dutch aid groups, for example. So it is part of the deal, and we all know this, or at least we should know this. Aid organizations are not the neutral and impartial organizations that they are supposed to be and that they claim to be.
Now, we've got a caller on the line. I think it's Daniel in Washington, D.C.
Yes. I have
go
a
ahead,
question.
please.
I've dealt a lot with Afghanistan and Sri Lanka. I find that a lot of the aid is not coordinated. Each aid agency has its own agenda, and then in the end, you find it's very difficult to get the aid down to the people. And it's almost impossible. Many times you do not get aid for people.
Daniel, let me put that to Linda. Linda, you mentioned the issue about, so many out there competing and they should combine resources. I know in some cases there are actually tens of thousands of NGOs trying to work in similar areas. To what degree, is their intention, presumably their intention is good and is the same, but to what degree do you find that they actually compete and that the competition does hinder what they're doing?
Yeah, well, part of the reason why there are so many NGOs in going to one war zone or to one disaster zone is because there's a lot of NGOs that feel that the competition is not working hard enough, or they're not there quick enough, or that they don't do the right thing for the people there. So that is in the basis, the competition is already there, because they just don't agree to each other's agendas. But then aid organizations are all dependent on their donors, and the large aid organizations organizations are dependent on their government donors. They get government money. And even the donors, they are in competition with each other. There's about more than 70 donor governments, and they all want their own agenda put in. They all want to do their own thing if they join in an international aid action. So the competition is at many different levels, from the donors down to even the smallest NGOs. And this is a big problem, and they know this problem exists, and they know also how to solve the problem by working together, and they just won't implement this solution.
Linda, it's interesting what you say about the agendas and how they might be conflicting. Now, this email that came in from Mohammed Amin into our Facebook page says simply, aid is a tool to promote Christian philosophy. And we've seen in a couple of cases, in the case of Haiti with children being taken out and the whole controversy over that was raised. But to what degree, and I mean, is Mohammed being a little too simplistic here?
Well, there is a lot of that going around, let's put it that way. One of the fastest growing branches of the aid industry is in fact religious groups, and then especially from the United States. Christian aid organizations, there are a lot of them. They have a lot of money because they are receiving the donations of churches in America. So they are about, they prefer to go to countries where there are still souls to be won. So yes, if you look at aid operation in Islamic countries, for example, you will always find Christian groups who will try to save a couple of souls there. So there is a lot of that about.
Right. Linda, so many more questions for you. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I thank you for joining us there from Amsterdam and hope to have a chance to chat with you again.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being with us at our new time here, and thank you for sending those questions in. Remember, you can follow our program on Twitter. We'll keep you notified of upcoming shows, and you can send us questions and comments to pose to our guests. On the next show, as Catholics around the world begin their Easter celebrations, we look at the church's growing paedophilia scandal. How high will allegations of cover-up go, and could Pope Benedict's leadership position be at stake? Hope you can join in tune in for that show, and from me and the team, until then, we'll see you next time.